Grand Rising, Grand Rising. Welcome to the live. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Deconstructing Christianity. I am Coach Renz. And tonight we're going to be talking about the Babylonian myth story and its relation and comparison to the Christian myth story. We've done a series of these. You can go back into the old videos and you'll see where we've done the Greeks and other myth stories as well. We're going to continue today. I did post a video earlier today. We're going to go over that video concerning the Babylonian story. What's up, Sean? How you doing? Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. And give about 5 minutes for people to get on. They will get started as per usual. Hope everybody's having a good day. Silver and ladder. Haven't seen you in a minute. What up, Tim? I'm assuming that people probably haven't seen the video I posted earlier today about the Babylonian myth creation story, but it doesn't matter if you did. I'm going to go over it again anyway. Do it again. So, doesn't really matter. Doing okay for a Monday. Monday's a great day. I have still yet to go and hit a golf ball. And then 3 days ago in the gym, I pulled my lower calf a little bit on my right leg. So I'm damn sure not going now. And then I got family members coming in on Thursday. So I got to get my leg right because there's going to be a lot of walking. It's a shame that I haven't been able to make it to the golf course. Okay, Sean just watched the video about 2 minutes ago. Well, you're going to hear it again. You're going to hear it one more time. One more time, you got to listen to it. There, Sean. Sorry about that, buddy. But yeah. The like isn't working? What do you mean? You can't like the video? It should be. Let me make sure everything is acting right on the YouTube. From what I can tell, the like is working. The super chat is working. Or they call it a thanks chat now or some shit like that. I think that might be on your end, sir. Maybe, possibly. If A at hero. Let me see. Let me check. Make sure. Let's see. How can I check? Where is that would be? Where would that be? Just checking on a few things here. Well, from what I can tell, it may not show up on yours, but I can see that it did work, Tim. So it's fine. It's fine. It's showing up on my dashboard. It says there's 3 likes so far. What up, John? How we doing, good people? Got my coffee. Got my one and a half cigars. I'm ready. Now, we're going to be talking about the Babylonian creation story. And we'll give a little bit about the Sumerians, only because it's a copy. Drew? neighbors taking their motorcycle out. She only takes it to go get gas. I've never seen them ride their bikes anywhere. All right, so what's up, everybody? How you doing? This is your Coach Renz, and tonight we're going to be talking about the Babylonian creation myths. So I'm going to refer to Marvel to a certain degree, but we're also going to see how the creation story of the Babylonians, how the Jewish people would have borrowed it, some aspects of it, once they were freed out of Babylon, and how this creation myth pulls from the Sumerian culture and why certain things are the way they sound. All right. So, the Babylonian creation myth. Understand that this is a creation myth that the Babylonians, it changed over time for them. The same Babylonian creation myth in the 700s, 800s is not, there's some differences by the time you get to the 500s, when they would have been more influential over the biblical version of the story. It also incorporates some similarities to some of the Greek stories. As you can imagine, they would have overlap. Whether they got it from one another or not isn't necessarily a factual thing, but just the commonality of being seafaring people, people living in Mesopotamia, people living by rivers and lakes and conquering. But yes, some of the influences possibly could have either influenced the Greeks or the Greeks influenced them, but they find similarities within both of the stories. Now, to understand the Babylonians, you have to look further back. The Babylonian culture is a culture that finds itself deriving out of the long-term Sumerian, Akkadian, Assyrian cultures, Mesopotamian people. So the Babylonian culture will have elements based on what the Sumerian story was. Now, if you was with us before when we talked about the Sumerians, the Sumerian story actually begins closer to where the Arabian Sea meets with the Persian Gulf, because before 12,000 or 9,000 BCE, that area was land. The Tigris and Euphrates River had joined and become one river, flowing down through the Persian Gulf, and there are satellite imagery that shows that there are ancient rivers underneath the Persian Gulf. So the Sumerian people experienced their experience of the Younger Dryas flood moved them from this area in and around the Arabian Sea, and where the river would have had a delta going into the Arabian Sea, further up inland to modern day Kuwait, and then encompassing the Mesopotamia, which is the land between two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates. So they would have come all the way up to where the rivers split. They developed their creation story based on that river delta of where whatever the name of that river would have been to them, flowed into the Arabian Sea. Let me make sure I'm saying right. Let me check something real quick. I keep saying Arabian Sea, but I want to make sure it's the right body of water. Yeah. The Arabian Sea, or the Gulf of Oman. To be more specific, the Gulf of Oman. So when this water it would have pushed them back, but they would have had a river delta similar to what you see in most river deltas that pour into large bodies of water, whether it's like how the Mississippi does, or how the Nile does, or any other major river that hits goes into a larger body of water, is going to form a delta. This is going to demonstrate fresh water mixing with salt water. So, according to the Sumerian story, which is part of the Babylonian myth, and I'm going to use the Babylonian names, you had the goddess Tiamat. Now, if you're a Marvel fan like myself, you will remember that in the Eternals movie, the seed celestial that was planted in the earth is Tiamat. Going forward in all the Marvel movies, Tiamat is the thing that came out of the Indian Ocean. So Tiamat is the celestial dragon, but she is also represented. She is also the representation of the primordial salt waters. And before the universe existed, before there was anything built within the universe, the primordial waters of the salt water of Tiamat and the fresh waters of Anu were just simply in the universe together. There were no planets, there were no stars, there was abiding in darkness. But in that darkness, with them having and being with each other, they became a couple. And being a couple, they had children. They then produced the first known children, the gods, which would have been your Enlil, Enki, Ninharsag. All of these different gods and goddesses were then born, and they existed in this primordial waters. Now we know how the Genesis story talks about how in the beginning there was darkness and there was chaos over the water, and God breathed his breath over the waters and said, let there be light. So this idea of a universal darkness is very similar. So they would have connected to that. So this primordial waters of Tiamat and Anu was this darkness. They started having the other gods. So similar to the Greek story where you have Gaia and Kronos, and they have all these other gods, Zeus and all of them, and so on and so forth. But in their growth, these guys, Enlil, Enki, Ninharsag, and all the rest, Ishtar, they began to have parties and, be loud and create a ruckus. And this noise irritated Anu. Similar to how Enlil was irritated by the noise of man and supposedly caused the flood. Similar to how the noise of the gods with Kronos caused Kronos to devour his children. But instead of devouring his children, instead of flooding man, Enki finds out that Anu was planning to kill all the new gods. And so Anu, while resting, is stabbed by Enki. Now, in the story, first they say the word there is slayed by Enki, and this is all according to the Enuma Elish. First they said he was slayed, but Anu is still alive. He comes back later. He said, and then the spirit of God moved across the water. I always think there's a way of describing the wind, as the water is always windy. It is a way of describing the wind, the ruach, which is also the breath of this God. So this God is represented by the wind. Now, if you remember, Yahweh originally was a storm god, a storm deity, a god of the wind. In the same way that Enlil is a storm god and he's the god of the wind as well. So that is going to be a part of the story about the wind. So, and this is what I'm saying, you won't find a word for word copy from the Enuma Elish into the Genesis story, but elements are pulled from the Enuma Elish into the Genesis story. And you'll see why the wind becomes important, and this guy's ruach is going across the face of the waters. Because, well, let me get there. So Tiamat is looked upon as this great dragon. And when Enki slayed Anu, she became enraged. Instead of being the loving mother who was loving the children that she had created and loving the grandchildren like Marduk, she became enraged that the children would kill Anu, their father and grandfather. So she began to create. She began to create monsters. She began to create the Leviathan, the dragons, the great serpents. So all these monstrous beasts she began to create because she wants to kill all of her children and some of her grandchildren. She convinces some of the grandchildren to create other monsters and serpents and things of this nature. So as she creates, as she creates them, the other gods, Enlil, Enki, Ilnana, Ishtar, same person, but then Harsag, all of them starts to get antsy. And so they know that they have to go to battle. Now, in the Sumerian story, in the Akkadian story, it is Enlil who is charged with slaying Tiamat or fighting against Tiamat. In the Babylonian story, when we get around the 600s BCE, the 500s, or more in the 500s, but 500 BCE, it is Marduk who is now the patron deity over Babylon. And so Marduk becomes the god who is said that, hey, if you were to, the other guys came to Marduk and said, if you were to slay Tiamat, we will make you the king of kings, the god of all gods. And we will all be the B'nai Elohim, the sons and daughters of God. And you will be the main guy. So Marduk, with this celestial sword and with the power and this celestial wind, this ruach, slays Tiamat. So this may be where the element of the ruach going over the primordial waters and breathing over the primordial waters, it could come from the idea that one of the main weapons used to slay Tiamat was the wind. And with Yahweh becoming a wind deity, and well, Enlil being a wind deity, and Yahweh the storm deity, which does encompass the wind, then it's reasonable to think that they grafted that element of God's breath blowing over these primordial waters, which is also, these primordial waters is a representation of Tiamat. And so Marduk slays Tiamat. And after he slays Tiamat, he utilizes the body of Tiamat to create the known universe, especially and mainly the earth. He uses her skull to create the vault of the heavens, to hold back the waters of Anu, because when Anu, who somehow is alive again, finds out that Tiamat has been destroyed, he becomes angry. So her skull is used to create a vault on the heavens to keep the waters above from coming down to the earth where the gods are going to live. So her skull is used to create this vault of heaven. Her bones are used, or legs are used, to create the pillars and the foundation of the earth, to hold the earth up. So that Jewish cosmology of the flat earth with the pillars and the foundation that you read about in Job can be grafted in from this Babylonian story, which is older. So she's the pillars that hold it all up. And then her body, they use her body to create the land and separating from to separate from the land from the waters. Now her eyes, because by the time the Babylonians get this story, the Persian Gulf exists and the Tigris and Euphrates River are two separate rivers. Her eyes are used in order to create the Tigris and the Euphrates River. Was she hot? She was a dragon, man. And she is seen as the mother of all dragons and lizards and serpents and the Leviathan and all these other creatures of the deep. So they utilize her eyes to create the Tigris and Euphrates. And Marduk goes ahead and uses her tail to create the Milky Way. So every time they looked up at night, they saw the whole long tail. Now, if you study Norse mythology, you'll find out that I forgot the name of the great dragon, but this great dragon was slain and its tail also becomes the Milky Way. And in many stories all around the world, in the Aboriginal, one of the Aboriginal creation stories, because they have many, it is the tail of the great serpent that becomes the Milky Way. So as cultures just looked up and saw the stars, they made up a damn story that that's the great serpent's tail, right? as with all these stories are made up in order to try to explain what people were seeing, what they were seeing in nature. So then she is disembodied. Marduk becomes the king of kings, god of gods, right? And so he is worshipped. But that's not the end of the story. You see, there's a great prophecy that Tiamat abides, even though she was slain and her body was used, she abides down in the deeps of the earth. Now, if you remember the Marvel movie, Tiamat was in the depths of the earth. And Tiamat fed on the cosmic energy of all the humans. And so that's why the deviants had to be killed, so that the human life and population would grow. And the more people were on the planet, the more energy Tiamat was able to absorb until it came out of the emergence, right? So in the Babylonian prophecy, Tiamat lies deep within the ocean. And the more man grows and the more men are on the planet, and as people corrupt the planet with poisoning the waters and poisoning the land, Tiamat is feeding on this energy of corruption that man is pushing down into the earth. And at some point, the Babylonian prophecies of Marduk's apocalypse, Enlil's apocalypse, Enki's apocalypse, all these apocalypses of all the different gods around the world will all happen first. And as each one of these apocalypses happen, Tiamat will rage against man. She will cause crazy weather patterns, storms, and will happen, earthquakes and hurricanes, and will happen all over the earth. And when those things are happening, then what you should realize is that Tiamat has gained enough energy to emerge, just like in Marvel showed you on Eternal, emerge from the center of the earth and destroy the earth. But see, the Jesus apocalypse has to happen, the Muslim apocalypse has to happen, all the other apocalypse, those are just things that need to happen. Kind of like how Marvel said that war needs to happen with man, because war creates innovation in medicine, creates innovation in health, and those innovation keeps man living longer and booms the population. Every time there's a major war on the planet or in any country, the population booms right after. And so all these things happening feeds Tiamat, according to Marvel, and all these things, all the negative things that men do on the planet feeds Tiamat, according to the Babylonians. And so when all the apocalypse things, those are the final things that need to happen that will feed Tiamat to the degree where she can emerge from the earth and destroy the earth and all the other gods and be the true mother goddess of all things, but be with her husband Anu as well as the father god, because she'll crack open the dome, the dome of heaven will crack open so she can reunite and be back into the darkness with her husband Anu. But it is prophesied in the Numa Elish that all these strange weather patterns we've been having, tornadoes happening in places that they never happened before, and global warming and ice ages and hurricanes more powerful than the previous year, all these things have to happen before Tiamat can emerge again. So we can see how the Bible talks about a similar prophecy, and possibly where the Bible got those prophecies from, of all the different the earthquakes and the storms and all the things of man and that has to happen before Jesus returns, or those things that have to happen before the actual Messiah in Judaism comes. But these are born out of their understanding of the Canaanite religion prior to them being conquered by the Babylonians. But that Canaanite religion also comes from the Sumerian Akkadian religion. And so it was easy for them to add that to their own religion. But we can also see how they borrowed the idea of the vault of heaven, the great serpent, and that how God defeated the Leviathan. And in the same way that Marduk defeated the Leviathan, how Marduk used the wind in order to defeat Tiamat. And the god El is a storm deity, Yahweh a storm deity, a wind god. And this puts that whole breath thing, the wind, in more perspective. Say war and peace. Yeah, so order of balance is duat. But yes, when you look at the Milky Way, this is where they many cultures see it as a serpent's tail, and it's understandable. You see serpents, and then you look at it. If you've ever, I don't know if you guys ever been in a place that's dark enough and be out there at the time frames. Some of the best time frame to see the Milky Way is like 3, 4 in the morning. But yeah, I can see how they said it was a serpent's tail. But yeah, I didn't see your earlier comment, John. But yeah, you go find you a place with the very little light, and you'll be able to see all that. Why is it called the Milky Way? In our more modern times, it's called the Milky Way because it looks, so if you ever had water and then you pour some milk in the water and it has that cloudy little swirly look to it, that's why they call it the Milky Way, because that's kind of what it looks like. I mean, you'll see all the stars and all that, but it's so many stars that it has this milky like appearance, like milk and water. But this story evidently influenced the Israelite people when they were captive by the Babylonians. Even when you read their own version of the story, it demonstrates how the elect of the Israelites were brought into the houses and the courtyards of the higher ranking Babylonians. And so they would have, these people of intelligence would have been able to read these stories, understand these stories. So when they finally were freed after 70 years, that's a whole 2 generations of people that would have grown up surrounded by Babylonians and would have adopted their stories. Just like if you have children growing up in any area, they're going to adopt the stories of those people. They may have their own story, but they're going to adopt some of the other versions of the story as well. The Enuma Elish is, most of it we have is the Babylonian version of the Enuma Elish. We don't have the Sumerian cuneiforms. There are some of that in Sumerian cuneiform, but the largest compilation of it is the Babylonian versions. I like how you just tell me next topic. Actually, I did a video about that years ago. I was talking more about the that I believe the Tartarians built what we call the Great Wall of China. I think it was actually built by the Tartarians, mainly because of how the construction is. As far as them being connected to the indigenous Americans, the Native Americans, that's so many generations past. By the time you get a people of Tartaria and the Mongolians, you had a whole ice age ago, 10,000+ years of whomever was in that land at that time migrating over into the Americas. So they wouldn't have necessarily looked the same, but they would be kinship. And that was actually proven by geneticists. It's funny, like crystal ball. I told my wife, I said they're gonna talk about this subject for about 5 minutes and then they'll be moving on. Is Sumerian same as the Babylonians? Yes and no. Their kinship. So as the Sumerian and Akkadians started to become dysfunctional in their empire, you had many groups, especially in between that 5,000 to 3,000 BCE time frame. Many different groups began separating themselves from the Sumerians because they was flipping back and forth between Sumerian rule and Akkadian rule, because the Sumerians and Akkadians had become a mixed group. Eventually, the Akkadians dominated in the latter centuries before the entire empire sort of dissolved. They dominated when it was still in the golden era. The Sumerians were the ones who was in charge, but they were only in charge like governmentally during the latter centuries, and then the whole kingdom just dissolved soon after. But like Sargon was the greatest Akkadian king that they had. But about 4 generations after Sargon, Sumerian kings took back over, but the more of the people were Akkadian. It was kind of like how the Greeks and the Romans. The Greeks would have been the Sumerians, the Romans were the Akkadians. So even though they appreciated the intelligence and the antiquity of the Greeks, they were Roman. So even though they appreciated the Sumerians, they were Akkadians. And then you move into the Assyrians and other conquering nations. But then the Babylonians came out of the dissolution of the Sumerian Akkadian empires. It is both. In all honesty, it is both Sumerian and Akkadian. You have versions of the story of the Enuma Elish in Sumerian, but you do have Babylonian texts of the Enuma Elish, relatively the same story, but with different changes. So, for instance, the one who slays Tiamat in the Sumerian version of the story is Enlil, whereas in the Babylonian version of the story, it is Marduk who kills Tiamat. Now, in the Sumerian story, Enlil and Marduk later on get into a whole war against each other because it's supposed to be Marduk's time to rule the earth, but Enlil doesn't want to give it up. And so Marduk and Enki wars against Enlil. And this is the basis of the Sodom and Gomorrah story, when Enlil bombs pretty much Sodom and Gomorrah, and 7 other cities around are destroyed by an evil wind, which the reason why some people say and call it an evil wind and believe that it was some type of radioactive cloud. Cain never died. His descendants are still here. He was afraid someone would kill him. If there was nobody. Yeah, there's sects of Christians who believe that Cain never died. I say Christians. There's sects of Jews and Christians and Muslims who believe that Cain never died and that his mark was that he would wander the earth for eternity. There's a series of a book called Casca. I told you guys about that before. It pretty much is similar to that, but it's not. Cain is like the Roman soldier who pierces Jesus' side. But there are other stories of indicate. What was it? The show Lucifer. That was Cain's thing. He was immortal. But you're right. Why would he be afraid if nobody else was around? But what Christians will say is that because after the Cain and Abel story, it talks about how Adam and Eve and after Seth, that they had many children, that it would have been one of his brothers and sisters who possibly would have killed him. Now, in the book of Enoch, it is said that I think Tubal-Cain, when he was an old man, that he killed Cain. So according to Enoch, Cain is dead. The unusual weather is due to the Milky Way, not Jesus returning, or we living in our last days. We are not living in our last days. An individual may be living in their last days, but as a species, no. Yeah, but according to the Babylonian story, the Milky Way is just the tail of this of Tiamat. What causes the end to happen in their prophecy is the corruption of man to the earth, because the earth is the body of Tiamat. And as we corrupt the earth, we give Tiamat power. And so she is the body of the earth. And then, so she is causing these problems because of the energy that we give her. Judean religion is a splendid group of other religions, Sumerians and other groups. And yes, pretty much. It just goes through a pathway of the Canaanites separating from the Sumerians and Akkadians, and then becoming their own group of Canaanites. And then out of the Canaanites, you get the Israelites. And then within those captivities, the Israelites, already familiar with the story, adapts it to their own story. You was looking at St. Kitts and Caribbean Island, and then knows that there's a lot of groupings of Christian church. Because Christians went there to set up camp. I don't know. I can't really answer that one. Right. The guy who says to love your neighbor as you love yourself is going to come back and kill all the neighbors. Right. He's going to kill everybody who doesn't believe in him. He's going to kill all of them. Yes, I do remember saying that Cain was the first vampire. I forgot what group of I forgot what group said. I forgot that whole. Yeah, there is a group that believed Cain was a vampire. I can't remember where that came from. If you think about it, Cain gave more to the earth than Abel, his descendants. Well, Abel than Seth. The descendants of Cain is the one who created crafts and metallurgy and all this kind of stuff. I like that dude better. He's had more ingenuity. Now, for somebody who was supposed to be a wanderer, he sure did set up shop in a city and build a bunch of stuff. Um, Actually, divinely autistic. The idea of the bull. So when you look at these, when they call them these bull gods or things of that nature, what you're looking at is astrotheology. The reason why the Babylonians had the bull, the Egyptians had Hathor, the bull, the Israelites had a bull, is because when you look at the great year, where the sun rises into one of the astrological signs, this was during an era of that. Now, supposedly, the reason why Moses was so mad at them is because they hadn't realized that they were moving out of Taurus and into, what is it? Aries is the one before Taurus. Whichever one is the ram. Is Aries the ram? But they were moving into the ram, the age of the ram. Just like the Jesus character is supposed to be moving us into the age of Aquarius. So the idea there on some in Kabbalah is not so much that they were worshiping the Egyptian gods of what they were used to, what they had learned in Egypt, but the fact that they were just in the wrong age, didn't realize Moses was a representation of changing to a new age of the ram. Okay, I know I get behind on some of y'all. Yeah, the progression of the equinox. Right. So then this is why till this day they blow the shofar. Exactly. Tau. They blow the shofar because they believe they are still in the age of the ram. We haven't got the Capricorn yet. That's the next age. We're supposed to be moving. We're in that 150-year time gap of moving into the age of Aquarius. But this is why the fish is used in so much symbology of the Jesus character, because he was in the age of Pisces, right? So that was the age of Pisces with the fish, with Jesus. So, okay, so I said that kind of a little bit wrong. That's a little confusing. Jesus represented the age of Pisces. So when Jesus came, that's the age of Pisces. Then when the disciples asked Jesus, when they was going into Jerusalem for Passover, whose house will we go in? He said, find a man carrying a pitcher of water, and to his house we will go into. Now, in their time frame, and even in today's time frame, if you go to some of these villages that are living in the old style, men don't carry water. That's a woman's job. So the only way that they would have understood that would have been astrologically moving into the age of Aquarius. So Jesus was the beginning of the age of Pisces. The ages usually last around 2,000 to 2,500 years. And then we move into the next age, which is Aquarius. And then about 2,000-3,000 years from now, it'll be Capricorn. So let me say that a little bit. So yeah, thank you for saying that, because that made me realize I need to say that in more detail. So we're like as Trifold is saying, and I'm thinking he's talking about the same thing, we're at the cusp of the age of Aquarius. We ain't quite got there. Although a lot of people like to throw us in there already. So that's why you got all those fish symbols with Jesus. The fishers of men, and the 2-piece fish sandwich to feed 5,000 people. No, we're still not in the age of Aquarius. Now, here's the thing about all these ages of Aquarius and all that kind of stuff. And this is my thing about astrotheology in a nutshell, though, and astrology. People look at the stars and they say, okay, it has an impact on us. Now, I can say it can be convincing. My birth chart is pretty damn accurate as to my personality, even though I know 75% of my personality is based on the experiences I've had. But there are some root things about me. But the first thing that I realized that turned me away from astrology is when they started saying Mars is in retrograde or Venus is in retrograde. And at first I didn't know what that meant. And then when I understood that to the eye, when you do the eye test, it looks like Venus or Mars or whichever planet it is moving backwards. But intelligently, planets don't move backwards. They don't. It's just our perception. And so when I realized that these things are based on the perception of somebody looking at a star and how it moves in our sky, it's like, okay, man, just like with this story of the fresh waters of Anu and the salt waters of Tiamat, and they're mixing, and that's where life comes from. They're just observing nature without understanding nature. We're still observing the cosmos without fully understanding the cosmos. But for what we do understand, I have to take away the superstitious bullshit. T-Pain, you missed the creation story of the Babylonian creation story. But I did do a video earlier today. If you saw that, I pretty much talked about that, but gave it some more oomph to it, some more details. I heard someone tell the children when they hear thunder, God is moving furniture around to make room for his children. I have never heard that one, but that sounds like some bullshit that I would have heard when I was growing up with some of my country ass relatives. No, when you hear thunder, that's Tiamat getting ready to emerge again. That's Tiamat. She ready to come out. Oh. You know, I don't want to get into a discussion about this. I can't stand that discussion, but what does so if we found out we lived on a flat earth, what would that gain flat earthers? What happens then? What's next? What's next? Nah, Queenie. When the sun is shining, I still say this one. I still say this one to this day. When the sun is shining and it's raining, the devil is beating his wife. And my grandmother told me that. And then one day I asked my grandmother, who would marry the devil? And she was stumped. She was like, well, you know what? That don't make no damn sense. But because at that time frame I was reading a lot of Greek mythologies, I was like, oh, it must be Persephone. He must have married Persephone. Angels, the angels were tap dancing when it thunders. Oh my gosh. It hides the creator. Oh, there's your problem right there. You believe in this God of this Bible, but the Babylonian creator God, Marduk, made the flat earth. So why would you, so which God do you believe? Because Marduk, he made the flat earth out of Tiamat's body, according to the Babylonian story. So, or are you believing in Yahweh in the Canaanite version? Because he's a storm. I mean, not Yahweh, El in the Canaanite version, because in the Canaanite version, El created the flat earth. But in the Sumerian version, it was Enlil, who is actually El, that created the flat earth. So which God do you believe in that created the flat earth? And how can you prove you believe in Jesus? How do you know that God did it? I mean, according to the people, we are on the back of a turtle. What about those people? Fucking flat earth. But I will give this dude a little credit. I will give this dude a little credit, because I always say that the only way, if you believe in the flat earth, you need to believe in the Bible, or believe in, the Sumerians or the Babylonians or one of these ancient religions. You have to believe in one of these ancient religions if you believe in a flat earth, because that is the only basis that you would have for a flat earth. He felt the Holy Spirit. You know what? Me and my wife, we was making love. I felt the spirit too. I felt, oh, I felt the spirit. Just how y'all believe in stuff based on your emotions? Now, let's get to real conversations. Do you think religion prohibits progression? Yes, this has been demonstrated. Well, it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird. Let me not say that. Let me not say that. Let me not say that. Because when you look at different cultures, in most cultures, religion does inhibit progression. We see that with the Christianity, how it prohibit create progression, even up to this day. So, give you two examples: the whole Dark Ages, that was religion prohibiting progression. You know, want to kill, Copernicus couldn't publish his writings till afterwards. Threatened Galileo's daughter in order for him to recant. Many scientists who had things that were modern, would have modernized things faster, had to hide it from the church. Even to, and some of you guys may not remember this because you might be too young, but if you remember when Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan were in office, Nancy Reagan and Ronald were very much against stem cell research, thought that it was an abomination to God for man to be doing that. But then when Ronald Reagan and so it was prohibited, it was stale, it was pushed back. But then when he got sick and some stem cell research had been done, all of a sudden she was for stem cell research again. Well, she was for it. She flipped the script because it affected her life. If her and her husband had not stopped stem cell research in the 80s, by the time he needed it, he might have been helped by it. So that is more of a modern day version. Now, when you look at Islam, Islam did not stop their progression in mathematics and astrology. And so when they became Moors, they became very technologically advanced in comparison to other Mediterranean cultures. So depending upon when you're looking at it and who's in charge, the culture can either push it up or push it down. First of all, don't insult my people. My people don't blindly follow me. My people go and do research on the things that I say to make sure, because I request from them always to check the information that I'm saying. And if I'm ever wrong, I will admit that I'm wrong. So you can go on with that bullshit. But you follow a book that was written 3,000 years ago by people who thought that the earth went under the flat earth. You think about it. If you truly follow your Bible, the sun is not inside of and going around in a circle. It goes under the flatness of the earth. All your flat earth models show the sun and the moon going around like a little flashlight. But the cosmology of the Bible has the sun going under the foundations of the earth and coming back around. Oh shit, I skipped something. Thank you, Trifold, for donating a 2-month membership for whoever grabs it. Now, that's the only thing I will give to flat earthers. If you prove the flat earth, that the earth is flat, then it opens the door to question things that the government and scientists have been saying. It makes it where, okay, if you lied about that, what else have you lied about? That's the only thing I will give to flat earthers if that ever comes true. It wouldn't prove they're God, because I can just as well claim Marduk or claim Enlil or claim I forgot the Chinese deity, but I can claim any of the other deities that believed in a flat earth back then. And people believe those things based on what they saw, not because they put satellites up or anything like that. Yet other people who were great mathematicians, like the Egyptians, moved away from their flat earth perspective and with math realized that the earth was not flat. And the thing about it, you can see the earth is not flat with actual observation. Ooh, y'all know it. Farther than I was at. Because they really don't truly fully believe what they believe, because they did. If they did, they would just move on. But they're angry. They're still emotionally corrupt. They still have emotional issues. That's why they come here. You know, flat earthers have to go against this one too, because the dome is supposed to be impenetrable. It's amazing what you then have to, it's like telling a lie. If I lie about this, I got to tell another lie to cover the lie. I got to tell another lie to cover the lie to cover the lie. Then I got to tell another lie to cover the lie to cover the lie to cover the lie. So if I believe the earth is flat and there's a big dome over the earth, I have to get rid of so many scientific facts. The went to the moon? No. Rain doesn't come from condensation in clouds. Rain comes from portals or windows that this God opens from time to time to allow the rain to come down. But isn't this God just being an asshole that he will not allow rain to fall on the deserts? That he will not allow rain to fall on people who are going through droughts? You know? Isn't he just being such an asshole that you would think if his chosen people were in Israel this whole time and when he was there, wouldn't he have made it lush and green instead of the dry, arid desert that it is, with a few areas of green where rivers and lakes are? I mean, he's such an asshole. Makes his own people suffer. Yet, Central Africa, lush. South America, lush. East Coast, lush. You know, parts of China, lush. The South Pacific, lush, green, everything. People who never heard of this God, just in the South Pacific eating fruit, just growing everywhere abundantly. You know, my ancestors just living in Africa, just, we ain't got to do, farming is cool. We'll do a little farming, but shit, we can just go pick shit off a tree. Exactly, which is why I don't even bother to talk to y'all, because y'all are so damn dunce with this stuff. Planting seeds, man. You putting rocks in the ground thinking it's gonna grow a damn fruit tree. This is their big excuse. Maybe someone here will see the truth. No, you're just emotionally barren. You're emotionally barren. If I went to other Christian sites just to argue with them, then that's actually a sign that I need confirmation from other people to stay solid in what I think. That's all that actually means. Psychologically, that's what that means. That you have an emotional issue. And that's a sad thing. Because anytime you got to go and try to take away someone else's agency to learn and study and think, and try to convince them to think like you think, be like you are, you're taking away their agency, which should be a sin. You should consider that a sin within your religion. And this bullshit, I'm not a Christian. I'm a follower of Jesus. Which makes you a Christian. Yes, Thomas. Trolls need validation. Why didn't it come up? There you go. Trolls need validation. Certainly do. Yeah. I mean, you might, when I was on a ship with the Navy and we're in the middle of the Atlantic, and I remember it was this flat earther guy on the boat with us. And he was all like, yeah, the earth is flat, the earth is flat. And I was like, so shouldn't you believe that once we get to, I was joking with him that we get to the edge 6 miles out, we should fall off, right? He was like, no, it's not like that. I was like, okay, but still, if you are a flat earther, when we see a ship and that ship is going off into the horizon, shouldn't that ship just get smaller and smaller and smaller until it's just out of sight range? Why does it dip and dip and dip and dip and dip? If the earth was flat, it would just get smaller. It wouldn't sink into the horizon. So it was, I was what, 19, 20 years old when that happened. And I was just like, yeah, I didn't even know as much about science as I know right now. I've forgotten more about science than I knew of science at that time frame. And I was like, that's just stupid. And then every other planet is a sphere or some type of sphere, you know, but the earth was made flat. Oh, this is an interesting. Yeah, I do think that he just needs some attention. So we're going to give him a little attention. I'm not here to argue. You will never change your mind. If I will never change my mind, then why are you even here? If the people here will never change their mind, why are you even here? You see how that don't make sense? That don't make sense. And then he gonna post a thing. You can kick me off if you want to. You brought yourself here. You can take yourself out. I'm not gonna kick you out as long as you're not rude. If you start calling people names, so brawler, as long as you don't call people names and it's disrespectful, I will never kick anybody out. Or now, if you was writing in all caps, that would get on my nerves, and I kick you out for that. Well, I can't say I don't know what everybody else here thinks, but the people who are making comments, I know how them jokers think. They've been here long enough with me. I know how they think. I love these people. Nothing humbles a know-it-all. I have never claimed to know it all. I just said that I've forgotten more science than I actually knew back then. Hell, I've forgotten more Bible than I than more. But I don't know. I'm always open to learn. I have yet to see anything about flat Earth that is convincing. Are you familiar? Are you firm? Are you a firm believer in the Bible? And it's, oh, I guess you're right, talking to Baller about that. Oh, that's the other thing. That's the other one, y'all. That's the other one. You haven't done much research. How do you know? How would you know that? Just like you said that, how would I know everybody who's on here's thought process? How would I know the people who are not typing thought process? How would you know what I've researched? How would you know? You wouldn't. You have no idea what I've researched. You have no idea that one of the most intelligent persons that I know of, he is incredibly intelligent and he is a family member, but yet he is a flat earther and a fake moon lander. And almost everything else, he is incredibly intelligent. And he and I went over flat earth stuff for at least a decade. Oh yeah. You motherfuckers are, yeah, delusional. Yeah, very much so. Here's the thing about the moon. Do I think we went to the moon? For all intents and purposes, I do, until something proves otherwise. But can't go back now? I think it's bullshit. I worked with the government long enough to know that the government will say one thing when it's a whole nother thing. It's not a can't go back. It is a no interest in going back because financially it wouldn't make any sense. And there is nothing to gain to make it make sense to go to the earth. Now, do I think there's a possibility that it all could have been faked? It's a possibility. Looking at the political environment of everything that was going on at the time frame, it is very plausible, knowing the government like I did when I was working for them, that they would do some shit like that. I wouldn't write that off, that we wouldn't fake it. But not having the capability, I don't believe that at all. But what's in it for us? I guess you don't think that the Mars rover went to Mars and all that other stuff too. Was Babylon real? Yeah, the Babylonian Empire and the city of Babylon, yeah, very real. That's been an excavated site for a very long time. You are right, Charles. All Jesus has to do is show up and everything is done. See, now the space station is different. A lot of scientific experiments are done on a space station, which helps us develop. We've developed medicines and things of that nature that are better done there. Better genetic research is done there. So it serves the financial rationale. You know, I was started watching this video, but I didn't finish it. He said, well, two things. Either we didn't go or they told us not to go back. And who that was is another question. There was somebody was posting a video about how Neil Armstrong changed his channel over to the medical channel. And he said that they are looking at us, that there was some people looking at him over the crater. I didn't finish watching that video, but I am going to finish watching that video. Very simple answer, Benjamin. The three pyramids were built on the most centered spot on Earth. So if you pick the most centered spot on a sphere, when you sway it side to side or tilt it, it relatively stays in the same spot. Now, the three pyramids relatively stay in alignment with Orion's belt or Osiris belt. Now, as far as the spinning part, because those stars, because of how things revolve, how the Earth revolves, and how the stars are moving in our sky, there's a different sky in the northern hemisphere than there is in the southern hemisphere. So they're still going to stay there, but as the planet revolves, those stars, they don't stay aligned with the pyramids during the daytime. They move, and then they come back at night, and they're back in that similar spot, but it doesn't stay exactly the same. Ooh, y'all typing too fast. You know what's funny? When they were playing, they showed on the camera this little girl, this black woman for Houston, and she was praying, and you can see her say, "God help us, God help us," you know, Jesus help us, or something she was saying. I guess it worked. Yes, so I'm going to get back to the subject matter. I told you I don't like dealing with that whole flat earth bullshit. So thank you, Trifold. Thank you very much. So for those who were here, uh, for the Babylonian creation myth, how many of you have heard the Babylonian creation myth story before? Obsidian order. Answer your question. What was your question? How many of you guys have heard the Babylonian story before? Obsidian order. Ask your question again because I don't see it. Oh wait. Don't worry, I found it. Help me with this English word. I pray in the name of Jesus. What is the name of Jesus? What's the name? Is it Amun, Amen, Amet, the African gods? No, Jesus, the Jesus character wouldn't be Amun or Amen, and it would be Aten. The uh, that's more relevant to Amun, who is the one of the depending upon which creation story of the Egyptians you go through, because when we did the Egyptian creation story, there was a bunch of them. There was like four main ones, and the god Amun would be the creator god of the Egyptian pantheon. I think the Memphis story or the Heliopolis story uses Amun, and he is just the creator god that came out of the darkness, out of everything. The Jesus character is a creation, a literary creation named Yeshua, which translates to Joshua, but the Greeks didn't have the verbiage to be able to say Joshua or Yeshua, so they made it as Isus, and then it became Ius in the Latin. But am I saying that right? It was Ius, yeah, Ius, Isus in the Greek, Ius in the Latin, and then transliterated as Jesus. So that's a transliteration, but it still means the same person, Yeshua, but in English should be Joseph. So if you do believe in that, you should be praying to, I mean, not Joseph, you should be praying to Joshua. It would be his English translation of the name. But like I said, it's a literary creation that was done in the late first century, mid to late first century, most likely initiated by Josephus ben Matthias under the rulership of Vespasian. But you're not praying to an African god. And I'll sit in order. Where are you? Where are you from, or where are you? Like, where are you from? Obsidian order. I apologize for getting thrown off by the other bullshit. I'm not talking about that no more. But yeah, I do find it interesting that Jesus believers didn't change the name to Joshua, the English speaking Jesus believers. Yeah, Barabbas' first name was Yahshua as well. And here's the thing, Yahshua was a very popular name. That's like John in America. My point is, why does Christian pray in the name of Jesus and then brings, oh, okay. So you just had me go through all that other stuff for nothing. I see. Well, it's because just like most other things in the Bible, they brought things over from other religions. So the Amen at the end of a prayer came about because of the popularity of the Kemetic teachings. And so they made it into their own word and gave it its own definition. But it is borrowed, yes. To them, they're not referring to the Egyptian gods, but in a sense, they are. Because somebody will tell you that, oh, it actually comes, the amen comes from this Hebrew word, which means so, I think so be it, or to the God, so be it, or some shit like that, which is the same thing that the Egyptians were doing. And most names get their meanings after the story is told about the name. Like when you see that, oh, and Abraham had a son named Isaac, or no, Esau was born, and Jacob, and it means heel grabber. It's a story that's told, and then they give a meaning to the name. Well, I wouldn't say it was instituted by the Romans, because the Hebrew people were kind of doing it before the Romans came into the picture. But Christianity definitely by the Romans. Yep, and this is a saying that they got from Amun-Ra, that there will be no other gods before me. Look, Christians are praying to a literary character. This would be like you praying to Macbeth, or you praying to, well, no, John Henry. Actually, you know what? It would be more like you praying to John Henry, a guy who, but John Henry is one guy. The Jesus character is multiple Yeshua people that were culminated into one and then made into the legend of Jesus. John Henry was a real guy, but did he barrel through a mountain in one day with a pickaxe? Hell no. He was just a good worker that then got legendized. So they are literally praying to a literary character based on elements of about 4 or 5 other people. And when they think about the Father, you can throw so many deities into the Father category, whether it's Marduk or Enlil, because Enlil becomes El in the Canaanites. They pray in the Anu, you know, and they pray in the Tiamat. Shit, they pray in the Odin. And they pray in the Chaos and Zeus, Hera. They pray in the Chetua and Odamare. Yeah, they pray in the Brahma. It's an interesting thought. I wouldn't generalize it like that, Jeremy. That the Romans nitpicked through Christian ideas, because it was Romans who it was Hellenized Greeks. I mean, like Hellenized Jews who created Christianity for the Romans, but then later, as people picked it up, whether some of them were Greeks, some of them were Romans, some of them were Jews who converted over to Christianity, and they actually warred against each other for centuries as to who was right. And new writings was always coming out, and people was believing in, you know, the Marcions and the Valentinians and all the other Gnostic gospels, the Lucians, and they were warring and fighting over it, over which way was the right way, up until what, 382. So for almost 4 centuries, they were all over the place. And yeah, a lot of it they did nitpick from Gnostics. I see what you're saying, right? But they really didn't like the Gnostics, because the Gnostics, that took away their power, the power of the institution. Two of the most interesting things that I saw at the Vatican was the fact that it has a big ass Egyptian obelisk, and then it has a big ass pine cone in the garden. Well, it wasn't in the garden when I was there. I think it was inside the basilica when I was there, inside the building, and then they moved it to the garden or something like that. It was in one of them. It's been 30 years. Right, I'm with you. You meant that they nitpicked out of the Gnostic understanding? Yeah, they took some of the Gnostic understanding, but they really they couldn't stand a lot of it. And it was actually the minority that won. It would seem that most Christians were more of a Gnostic flair back then than the Orthodox. What's the real name of God and his son? Terrence Collins and whatever your son name is. Nah, just playing. That God doesn't exist. But if that God, Enlil, and his son Enlil, yeah, Enlil, we'll go with that. And Enlil's becomes El in the Canaanite pantheon, and Yahweh. I can't remember if Yahweh was the first son or Baal was the first son. But if you go even further back, their god is Anu, and his first son is Enki, but his first son to his, and this is in the Sumerian version, the first son to his actual wife, his sister wife, was Enlil. So the way the royal bloodline went, it would be Anu and Enlil. I don't have anything against Ray Hagan. It's just it's like church. He still got that church vibe. That's the only reason why I don't follow him. I used to listen to some of his stuff like 7-8 years ago, but it's too churchy. Exactly. From the Abrahamic perspective, that's why I would say El, and then Yahweh. But I don't know which one came first, Yahweh, Baal, or Shamash, and all the other two. I think they had like what seven sons. Really? Have anybody else heard this? Muslims just declared a fatwa to jihad against Israel. You know, I would love to go back to the 200s, 300s, just to see all the infighting that was going on in Christianity. So that's in the times of India and in the Jerusalem Post. Okay. Got me curious. Jihad declared against Israel. Yep. Muslim scholars are calling for a jihad. That's what the against Israel. Well, let's see if the government, the government got to, the Muslim government's got to jump in and take that up for it to actually happen. So you got to go back to the 300s, the whole bunch of first cousins. Yeah, it'd been interesting. It'd be very interesting to go back. I wish time travel was a real thing. I'm a little sketchy on like how there are tribes in Zimbabwe and Botswana and these who claim that they've been practicing Judaism for all these centuries before they ever had European contact. I'm a little on that now. If you said there were some Ethiopians, some Somalis, some Egyptians, I might grant you that, since they're close to the Levant. And there could have been some Jewish people, some people out of Levant who went down to those countries. But as far as some of these southern Saharan African countries, I buy theirs kind of at the same level of Haile Selassie, all of a sudden claiming he's from the Solomonic dynasty with no damn proof. I just don't see the proof in it. Yeah. But one other thing that I always look at, there are some customs that you can find all over the world, but that don't mean that they came from the Hebrews. There are just going to be some customs that are just like mind share in the ether that people are just going to develop because of their environment. They all believed in sky gods and river gods and lake gods and, you know, and all that bullshit. Most cultures had animal sacrifices and cleansing rituals and all of that stuff. You find that in almost every culture. Anu didn't have 7 sons so the Canaanite version, Enlil becomes El. El and his wife Asherah, I think, has 7 sons. It's either 7 or 12 or some shit like that. But see, let me tell you what happens, Obsidian. When a culture becomes dominated by another culture and their religion is passed on, but also their cultural attitudes are passed on. And then what happens is that a group of people start to manufacture stories that their ancestors was doing this or doing that. And they were practicing Judaism beforehand because they want to be God's chosen people when that becomes the dominant thought. And they walk away from their true ancestral religions, which is indigenous to them, and they graft on to what's popular, kind of like the Hebrew Israelites. They just jump all on the fact that they Hebrew Israelites, and they'll nitpick a little thing here and there to try to make themselves fit. And that type of assimilation is really regrettable because you lose all the true oral history of your people because you don't tell the oral history no more. And then after a while, it's lost. I was watching this documentary on the TT at the Isle of Man. And on the Isle of Man, there is this language almost died. It got down to like 10 people were only able to speak this language because they had adapted so much of the Irish language and customs that they lost themselves. Now there's only 1,000 people who speaks this language. So they're pretty much losing their culture because they identified with the more dominant culture. There was no Judaism in Sub-Saharan Africa. Not until Europeans started coming there in the late 1400s, early 1500s. Sean said, off the wall idea of watching something else. Do you think it's possible that people from Egypt made it to South America and that there were similar cultures that's where similar cultures came from, meaning the pyramids, mummification practice? What are your thoughts? Even some religious practice. If you had asked me that question about 20 years ago, I would have said, hell no. But when I saw the gentleman who built an Egyptian boat, the Thor II, and he effectively sailed across to the Americas on that damn boat, Because yes, there are some similarities that you see in Australia, and there's some hieroglyphics in Australia. There's some similarities in the Americas, and then people in the Americas talk about people coming over there and trading with them. 20 years ago, I would have said no. But when that man built that damn boat out of the same materials that were available in Egypt, I have to question it. I have to say that it's a possibility. Just like with the gold tip spears, that gold is only found in Ghana, but they had them in the Americas in the 1500s. So I got to say there's a possibility. I didn't see that. What tool? What was the tool so to make it easier for me to search for it? Now, why do you say not the Egyptians, though? You said yes, but not the Egyptians. You don't. You're reading Doriel's Emerald Tablet, and Thoth left Egypt and went over to the Americas and established the colonies, according to Doriel. Yeah, I was watching a documentary probably about 5 years ago, somewhere around in there, and the Aboriginals talked about pretty much Egyptian people who had came to visit them, and they taught them some of their hieroglyphics and all that sort of thing. Hmm. Oh, I see what you're saying, John. And yes, it's being proven more and more and more that other ancient cultures were seafaring cultures, especially in the South Pacific and the Southwest Asian islands, that those people were crossing great lengths of great bodies of water. Hell, I think if anybody would have went over there, if I had to say somebody other than the Egyptians, I would have said them damn Phoenicians. Phoenicians were some seafaring ass people. And if you can sail all through the Mediterranean, you can sail the Atlantic. But the only thing about pyramids is that to build a pyramid is the most common shape to build when you're using earthen materials. So you don't necessarily have to meet somebody else for you to develop that same technology. That's my only thing about pyramids. Now, the Great Pyramids are built differently than most others. It is not a four-sided pyramid. It has like, I think like 8 sides to it. 8 or 16, something like that. It has like 8 sides to it. It has multiple sides. It's unlikely that they would have made it to Sub-Saharan Africa. Could they have been in, that's why I say Egypt, Ethiopia area, Somalia? Sure. Crossing the Sahara into West Africa? Hell no. No. Unlikely. If the Romans would have known what was on the other side of the Sahara Desert, them motherfuckers they would have been trying to get around there. So stone tools dated back 3.3 million years ago. Okay, I have to look that up. I haven't seen that yet. And usually I get alerts from different archaeological organizations. I haven't checked in a couple of days. Yeah, there's a ton of similarities, and it's kind of, I hate to use monkeys, but there was an experiment done with these monkeys in Japan where they taught these monkeys how to wash their food. And these monkeys were not in contact with monkeys on some other island off Japan or Okinawa, somewhere like that. But after a few generations, the other monkeys that had no contact with them started washing their food as well. There's something about thought waves that we have yet to discover. There's a level of it that we haven't even got to. Okay, I have to post this, y'all. What the hell you talking about, Tim? You had to walk I had to walk my wife. Did I? You had to walk your wife? You put on you doing some BDSM? You doing some BDSM while we on here talking? I had to. I'm sorry. Tim be messing with me all the time, y'all. So y'all know. Yeah, the Bantu expansion moved out of mainly northwest Africa down in through West Africa and Central Africa. I mean, it's the most likely expansion, but those Bantu people were not Jewish. If that's what you're getting at, they had nothing connection to Judaism. Hell, if anything, they would have been more connected to the ancient religions through Senegal, the Gambia, the Mali Dogons. They would have been more connected to those religions, which is why they have more similarity to those religions than they have to the Hebrew religion. I mean, think about it. The Dogons had a religion where, and the Sumerians had this too, and the Babylonians, where there was a god, a kind of fish god that came out of the waters and then returned back to the waters and taught them some shit and went back into the water. And that carried into many of the teachings in West Africa. It gets weird around. Yeah. Since you're always messing with me, Tim, you and your wife out there, she probably beating you with a whip right now. Oh, thanks for looking that up for me, Jeremy. Or if you just knew it. Yeah, I knew it was more than it was more than 4. 12 and 8. And when you think about the Bantu migration, people are experiencing different climatic changes, so they migrate. I'm curious, are you claiming you don't believe a man was crucified who claimed divinity? I don't believe a man was crucified who was divine. I'm sure that many of the Jewish Messiah types claiming to be the Messiah were crucified. Hell, Pontius Pilate was so cruel at crucifying people that the emperor was getting ready to take his job. Luckily for him, on his way back to Rome, the emperor died. But the difference is, I don't believe there was a man who died that was divine. There was no son of God to take away your sins who died. Modern Judaism is connected to ancient Judaism, except they've made excuses and changed their beliefs the same way Christians have done for centuries. So, like, and they did it even back in the day, they did it. You used to be able to bring your sacrifices to your local temple. But then Hezekiah, with the Assyrians crushing northern Israel, centralized all sacrifices and temple worship to Jerusalem. So he changed it based on the environment that was going on at that time frame. Now, since the Romans destroyed the temple, now they claim that, oh, we can't do sacrifice until the temple is rebuilt, because Hezekiah made that change. So they can't do it in their local temples anymore. That's a change based on culture and politics. So they're similar, and just like they're trying to do this red heifer, which I didn't even check to see if they did the red heifer. That's based on an old ancient tradition. Oh, you saw that? It's generational with the food washing monkeys. Yeah. I don't think the Jesus of the Bible was crucified. No. There was some Yeshuas who were crucified, but not the Bible Jesus, not the miracle walking on water dude. I've read the book of Enoch. It's good fan fiction to read, but there's nothing truthful about it. And it's basically telling you the Sumerian stories. Not so much, no, but yes. So when you look at Mali is that north. That's why I said northwest Africa. But there were certainly climatic changes because the Sahara Desert grew, and that in itself is evidence of, and that was happening during that time frame, and has still been happening. The Sahara Desert is still growing. They're trying to stop it, but it's still growing. But they still weren't Jews. Whether I'm right or wrong about climatic changes, they still were not Jewish people. And no, Jesus, nobody walked on water. Now, at what point did I say I believe the Sumerian tales? I don't believe the Sumerian tales about as much as I believe the Bible tales, as much as I believe the Greeks, the Norse, the Hopi, shit, any of them. I don't believe none of these stories. They're all stories. There are those who argue that the mermaid stories were first told in Africa, but you can also find those mermaid stories everywhere. No, the Bantus weren't the ones who were talking about Syria. That was the Dogons. Roughly the same area, but the Dogons are the main ones that's attributed to. Those were the ones that in the 1800s, well, no, the 1800s, they met them and they was telling them about Sirius, Sirius A, Sirius B, Sirius. I don't know about Sirius C, but I know Sirius A and B, and a planet that was around Sirius B. That's right. The spaghetti monster is always in control. No, no. The entirety of the Bible is not allegorical. When they wrote about Joshua destroying Jericho and Ai, they were being literal. When they talked about splitting the Red Sea, they were being literal. When they talked about walking on water, they were being literal. I'm trying to keep up. Y'all are moving. Do you believe Mother Nature is God? Mother Nature doesn't have a consciousness. It just does what it does. Mother Nature is, I mean, Mother Nature is just a term that we use. But nature, if there is a God, nature is that God. And nature is far beyond just what we see on Earth. There are so many natural laws that we do not even understand yet. But, okay, they don't claim to be Jews, but they claim to have ancient Hebrew roots. No, they don't have ancient Hebrew roots. They have adopted some Hebrew things and are claiming it to be ancient. They are disrespecting their ancestors. No Hebrew ever made it to West Africa, Northwest Africa, or West Africa. Not until much later in the history. I mean, there are so many tribes of people who never dealt with Hebrews that claimed that a Messiah would come. Everybody always had this, there will be one who will come and bring peace and prosperity and we will overcome our enemies. They all got that same story. You know, they all got their animal sacrifices. They all have that same bullshit that goes on. Why don't you believe in God? There's not enough proof that a God exists. Here's the thing that most people can't say, and this is why they believe in gods. I don't know. It's always been here. And things don't come from science. Science merely tries to understand how the universe works. But the universe has always been here, as far as we know. People mistakenly think that people who don't believe in God thinks that there was a beginning of the universe. But there is no, we have no idea, and we wouldn't know. I'm sorry, I'm looking at something real quick. Just checking something real quick. I'm gonna say no, sir, to, and this is, see, I wasn't sure, but I just had to look it up. But the Kush Empire never reached far enough south to modern day DRC. Let me see. See, this is why we have to look at things. To be able to see things exactly This map, this ain't gonna be big enough, I can tell. That ain't gonna be big enough. That's probably, that'll work. That's big enough. Let's see if it'll save. And let's see if we can get one that will give us enough detail. No, you know what? I need a more detailed map. I know y'all probably typing stuff, but I can't see what you're typing because I'm trying to look this up to see if I can find a map that would show enough of the region. Well, hell, this one in itself shows enough. It doesn't show me the detail that I want, but it shows enough. And of course, it's a version that I cannot download. This one is. Can I download this one? Yes, I can. All right. I'm finna come back in just a second. All right. I want to show you something. All right. All right. I want you to look at how far the Kush Empire goes. Now you see how it is still part of the Red Sea. That's the farthest the Kush Empire ever went. Is down and still parallel running to the Red Sea, about as low as Bahrain in the no, that's the Red Sea. That's not Bahrain. Sorry, Bahrain's on the other side of the Arabian Peninsula. But there's a little island that sticks out right there. That's about as far south as it goes, right? So when we look at a map of the DRC where it's located, the red, it's nowhere near the Red Sea, nowhere near as far. It's further. Its latitude is further south than the Horn of Africa, which is where Somalia is. So the Kush Empire, although people like to say, "Oh, the Kush Empire was Sudan," it never encompassed all of Sudan, modern day Sudan, and then they have to encompass southern Sudan. So it never went that far. The Kush Empire would have had zero contact with Congo. Yeah, so that doesn't work. So when we hear people say things like that, we can't just look at, oh, Kush Empire and Sudan. We got to look at how big was their empire and influence at that time frame compared to saying where Congo is today. They don't connect. And even at the Congolese people never went way up there in those time frames. They wouldn't have been Congolese people. They would have been different tribes at that time frame. The main reason that most scholars agree that human life, Homo sapiens, came out of Africa is because the oldest Homo sapien civilizations and bones and stuff are out of Africa. Now, that's one of the reasons. We haven't been able to find older Homo sapiens in any other place on the planet than Africa. And then you can genetically see the migration and interplay between Homo sapiens and the different Homo erectuses that was around and how the genes began to dominate. But if we were to find out that there were Homo sapiens in South America or North America, and they're older than what was found in Africa, then I'm open to saying, well, I guess we all started here. But Pangea doesn't count because there were no Homo sapiens around during Pangea. Just want to throw that one out there before anybody say it. There was no Homo sapiens around during Pangea. Pangea was millions and millions of years ago. Homo sapiens are about 200,000 years old. Now, could there possibly have been some other hominid? Sure. Yeah, I'm pretty much saying there was no contact during those eras. No, nobody, people didn't. The Sahara Desert was deemed impact. It wasn't passable, like because of these types of beliefs. One of the reasons why, so let me put it like this: Europeans didn't travel to the Americas other than the Vikings at an earlier time frame because most people accepted the limited belief that you go 6 miles off the coast and you fall off the earth. So people didn't really try it. You know, they didn't know how far it was. So those who might have tried it may not have carried enough supplies. But it wasn't until somebody breaks that limited belief that people start saying, oh, okay, there is something. But people literally believe they couldn't cross the Sahara. Now it makes you wonder. And when they would come down the Red Sea, they would just flip around the peninsula of Saudi Arabia, and people went to India before they continued further south. And then there's the reason, and there's a why do it as well. And I take this off of his statement, Boondock statement, salt was taken from the Sahara and sold. What do I need to cross the Sahara for if I got industry that I'm getting from the Sahara? I don't need to keep going. I got big business going on here. That example was Eurocentric. So let me give you another one, trifold. The Mali Empire, the people of before Mansa Musa, I forgot the king's name. Those guys knew that there was the Atlantic River and that they could travel across it. They traveled across it, sent the first expedition. One ship got scared when they hit the Atlantic River, came back. The other ships never came back. Bigger expedition was sent off. They traveled across. They never came back. But when they probably went along the South American coastline, maybe froze trying to go to Antarctica, or came across and stopped in somewhere in South Africa, Namibia, somewhere around in there. But when Columbus went over there, he found, and Cortez and De Soto, they found out that those people had been trading with some black people, and that they claimed that there were black people already there. There was the indigenous people, and then there was some tall black men who were there. So that king of Mali, which I'm sure some of you guys know what the name is, went there, just didn't come back. Now, and when people don't come back, the negative thought process is the first one that people think of. Oh, they must have died, they didn't make it, or whatever. But we see that according to journals, they made it and they were there. But if I'm living in Africa, I got all my resources. This is why West Africa, Central Africa, Southern Africa, and any other place in the world develop technologies at different time frames. Necessity. Necessity equals invention. It's the mother of all inventions. Central Africa, I don't need nothing from nobody else. We got everything we need right here. What we need to go somewhere else for? And that's a legitimate psychological thought process. Most people start adventuring out when the population grows so large that the land can't sustain the people. So this is why the Mongols went outward. This is why Europeans went outward. People go outward when that happens. People in the Southwest Asia, they went outward to search out more land hopping, island hopping. People in the South Pacific, same thing. It in a way it does. I wouldn't give the Gulf Stream all the credit, but it does start from, this is the route of hurricanes. The Atlantic River is pretty much the route hurricanes follow. If you ever want to follow the Atlantic River, look at the route that hurricanes follow across the Atlantic, and then it splits when it gets at the Caribbean. There's a stream that goes north, there's a stream that goes inward that we normally call the Gulf Stream that then wraps back around, and there's a stream that goes south towards Brazil. I've been on the Atlantic River on a boat, and it's an interesting thing because when you're right at the, somebody used the word cusp a little bit ago, when you're right at the cusp of it, you can, if you watch it, you can see the different current. If you're on you can see it. You have to watch it though. It's not like an obvious thing, but if you're watching it, you can see that these waves are moving faster than these other waves are moving. And I personally got caught in it. So I know that motherfucker moves. I know people who have received it. Oh, you're talking about something. I don't know what you're talking about. Do I have a cap? No, I was on a Navy ship when I was in the Marine Corps. I was on a Navy ship. We floated down to and past the Atlantic River because there was I think it was 1992. We didn't know if we was gonna go back to do another evacuation in Liberia, but they thought that we was gonna do an evacuation in Angola, and so that's when we flowed down there to and past the Atlantic River is when we was going to Angola. Hey, Marine Corps is a department of the Navy. I don't like being on open water, like that type of water. Let me tell y'all something. Don't get on that damn Atlantic. Every time I went across the Atlantic, I was seasick for at least 3 days. Caribbean, I can handle. Goddamn Atlantic, boy. I know that. That's why if my wife ever say we want to take a transatlantic cruise, I'm like, I'll meet you on the other side. Yes, the Mali did have a Trans-Saharan trade network, which included the Mediterranean. And they would pull, but see, they would pull from other people in like modern day Gambia's Senegal area. They weren't pulling from Nigeria. Now, by the time we get to the Mali Empire, though, crossing the Sahara was different. The path was made. It's kind of like that one person do it or one caravan do it. Now we can figure out how to do it. We know the lay of the land. We know it's across there. So by the time we get to the Mali Empire in the 1400s, 1400s, people can do this now. But when we go back to first century, CE, first century BCE, and we wasn't crossing that damn Sahara. On my father's side, I was able to trace one line to a Dogon tribe. They got their ass whooped and sold into slavery. Then I was able to trace on my mother's side. I was able to trace two lines. One line seemed to be in or around Benin. The other line was more around Nigeria. But exact tribe, it didn't go that far. And yes, they came across as slaves. And actually, and so just to make some people happy, on my mother's side, there's also one line that goes to the Creek Indians. But you know what was messed up about that one line that went to the Creek Indians? The man was bought as an African slave to a Creek woman that she bought him to be her husband because they died from a whole bunch of war and diseases. Shit, I forgot his name. Is that one on my phone? I don't know if that one is on my phone. Shit, I don't have my glasses. I broke them again. Ooh, I can't even see that. Nope. Oh, so the only ones that are on my phone were the earlier, more recent lines that only go back to about 1800. Well, around 1860, 1870. Now, I'm sure there are some other lines, but a lot of the lines, they dead in like in the early 1900s or the late 1800s. There's only a few of them that went back to the 1600s. There was only like a handful that went to the 1600s. But there's nothing beyond this. The only thing that's beyond the 1600s is the white people. Yeah, I've heard this one. I haven't tried that one yet. Now, is that what she did? I think one of my children did that one, and I know she got. And I told her what she was gonna get, but she didn't want to believe me. But she did get Yoruba. Yeah, she must have did that one because she was like she got Yoruba, Igbo, and she got Mali. But she got some other stuff because she got a mama too. I saw something pop up, but I didn't read it to see what was going on. So I meant to go there. Usually, I'm pretty up to speed on what's going on in Africa. Oh, then she must have done something else. If it doesn't give you percent, then it must have been something else she did. That was like a year ago that she did it. Man, look at you little weed heads. Don't be doing no deals on here. But yeah, this is the main. It's interesting, but I don't put a whole bunch of weight into it because it's just like it's nice to know, but it doesn't make or break me. You know, as long as I know who my parents were, I know who my grandparents, I know my aunts and uncles, I know the people who had effects on my life. That's all I really care about. All the other stuff was just curiosity. Mm-mm-mm. Y'all weed people. Interestingly, so my mom, my aunts, and my brother and his wife are coming this week. And because they got the little weed stores here, and I ain't gonna say who in my family who's coming who smoked the weed, but of course in Georgia it's not legal, so I'm definitely taking them to a spot to let them see what it's like to have legal weed. Woo! Isaac, if I just didn't know any better, boy, you know I would go off on you on this one. I can't stand that nonsense. Mississippi is the real Nile. Oh, I forgot to say thank you everybody who supports the channel through memberships, through subscriptions on Facebook, memberships on YouTube. Everyone who supports the channel this way, thank you guys. I forgot to say that. From what I understand, the the flower is legal that has THA or TCHA or whatever that shit is. But the TCHA or THA is actually can be stronger once you burn it than THC, and that's what's legal here in Texas. What the hell is that? What was that supposed to be? It looked like a piece of broccoli. Yeah, it can when you THCA converts to THC when you burn it. Thank you. Yeah. The only bad thing about taking my family members over there is that I know that within a week or two, I'm gonna get a phone call telling me, "Can you mail me some of that?" And I'm like, "Hell no, I'm not going to jail for you. You better load up." And I'm gonna let them know when they get here. You better load up while you're here. But I know my brother, and he gonna be like, "You ain't taking that shit back with me." I know my brother gonna be like, "Hell no, you bringing that shit." We gotta travel through one, two, three states to get before they get back home. Well, I know he's gonna be like, "Hell no." What the hell was that, young man? Was that supposed to be broccoli or was that supposed to be some shrooms or something? Young man got that broccoli for us. A little healthy. Like my vegetarian, what did my wife make me today? Vegetarian ramen, which was excellent. I gotta tell y'all, my wife is an amazing chef. Amazing. But I had to go back to being meatless. My body responds so much better being meatless. Are you serious? They use gasoline to make Coke? I have never heard that before. Nah, T-Pain, that's not me. I smoke straight cigars, just regular cigars. Even if I go to Cuba and you can get a marijuana cigar, I will still just want straight cigars. Um, I don't like weed. I just don't like it. I mean, I used to once a year would use it for meditation purposes, but it doesn't have enough. I have an incredibly high tolerance for those things, and the weed just don't do it. At first, it used to do it a little bit, enough for me to do my meditation once a year on my personal New Year, but it just don't do enough to get me where I need to be for my meditation, for my annual meditation, which I haven't done it annually in a while. It's been a bit. Kind of got off the schedule and kind of just did it whenever I wanted to. I think you are from the Tikar tribe. Now I'm gonna tell you, Obsidian, when I lived in Germany and there was a large African community in the city that I lived in, I used to get people telling me, you look this and you look that all the time. Central African, yep, Cameroon. I used to get Cameroon, which Cameroon makes some really great cigar leaves. Just to let you know, just in case you didn't know. I tried the gummies, but all it did was make me go to sleep. I just went to sleep. When I was in California 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I tried gummies. I just went to sleep. I was waiting for it to kick in, it ain't kick in. And then after a while, I was like, you know what? It's 2 o'clock in the morning. I took them things at 8 o'clock and they ain't do shit. Trifold, you know they do this every time. If the subject matter maybe lasts 45 minutes to an hour, maybe. But anytime after that, they all over the place. But if you have anything about the subject matter, Trifold, that will definitely get my attention. That's right. Let the broccoli set you free. If it's a shroom, I'm with it. Oh, so you're Cameroonian? How did you know that? Yes, it is. It is B positive. How do you know that? How you know my blood type? You been Jose monkeying me? I've never heard of this. The tribal unions in the U.S. they can help them start language classes. I never heard of that. That would be kind of cool. Oh, oh my! You know what? I read that book. I read the blood type diet. I read that like around 2006, 2005 when I was a personal trainer. You know, I tried it out on some people. You know, it had its levels of effectiveness. That's my dude. Because you always be positive. uh, okay, I'm looking at these. I ain't got my glasses on, but I'm looking at these folks. That dude could be he could be my uncle. Way that dude look. He could be he might be my uncle. And my cousin right there. A cousin. A cousin. But yeah, when I lived in Stuttgart, Germany, there was a lot of different Nigerians and Kenyans and Somalis and Eritreans. Uh, there were some Congolese people. There was some There was a few Cameroonians that I ran into, but except for the Ethiopian, Eritrean, Somalis, everybody thought I was like from them. And it was always weird because they just started talking to me. I'd be like, I don't know what you're saying. Sprechen Sie Deutsch? Sprechen Sie English? They started speaking Swahilis and all that. I was like, oh man, I would love to learn it, but I have no idea what you're saying. Okay, so Evelyn said they're on the internet. I'm gonna check it out. I would. San Antonio is so limited in folk. I would hope that there was some. I can tell you, last night, me and my wife, we took a drive through downtown since it's the Final Four is here, and we saw some brothers who was sitting up there. They kind of look Sudanese, and I'm thinking they was here because of the Sudanese player for Duke. I had to ride past them 2 times because I wanted to pull up on them. One day was at my favorite little distillery. So if you're ever here and you want to go to a distillery with me, I'm gonna take you to Devil's River. But I wanted to pull up on and be like, man, where y'all from? What y'all doing here? Is there an African community around here? Because I sure hell can't. I can barely find the black people around here. Say you look like the Punt people from Punt. Now, where can we find that information? Where can I find that information? I've never found a solid number on a number that left a certain place. The Ivory Coast has some of the best records that I've seen, but I haven't seen. I don't think I've ever come across records from Cameroon. San Antonio, Texas. It's nice. Don't get me wrong. I like it. Ooh, okay. So back to the creation myth. Thank you. What do you think about the myth in the Bible about Yahweh fighting the chaos snake to create order before he could create other stuff? You must not have been here for the first one. I think that story is borrowed from the Babylonian story of Marduk fighting the dragon of Tiamat in order to stop the chaos that she had going on and trying to kill all the other gods, and then use the body of Tiamat to create the earth and the dome and all that other shit. So I think that it's just a borrowed story of him fighting the Leviathan, because Tiamat supposedly also created the Leviathan and all these other sea dragons and whatnot. She's considered the mother of dragons. So I think it's just a borrowed story that they took from the Babylonian creation story. And I say I think, but I'm quite positive. Because when you look at it, even though we know the Babylonians pulled from eventually the Akkadians and Sumerians, the Israelite story, the biblical story, really hones in on the Canaanite and Babylonian stories more so than anybody else. And I know a lot of people like to attach it to the Kemetic story, and there are some influences, but I think that influence comes from where the Canaanites, before they became Israelites, grafted some of the Kemetic stories in conjunction with the Akkadian stories. But by the time we get into the actual writings of the Bible, which happens around 500, 400 BCE, the Babylonian story is really infused into their story. And I do find it interesting that the Norse mythology has similar stories and they didn't have contact with these people. And you have to understand the Norse story. Well, there's some level of contact. So let me put the contact in perspective. In around 120, 140 CE, you have Tacitus writing about the Germanic story. The Germanic story eventually does become the Norse story. So that's the closest connection that you would have to the two. But of course, it's centuries apart and but that story could have traveled with the Romans as they fought the Germanic people, and the Norse people then picked it up. Because the Norse mythologies are really young compared to everybody else, the Sumerians and all of them. But this great serpent is a common story, even for people who never had contact with each other. Is there a similar Greek story to all of this? A slave body becomes the earth and the skies. It's not so much a body that becomes it. The similarities in the Greek story would be how Kronos wanted to devour his children because they were too loud, just like Anu wanted to kill his children because they were too loud. Then one of the sons, in this case, it's Marduk is the grandson, Zeus is a son, winds up killing the father. But Enki did kill the father, but it is Marduk who then killed the mother. So you do have Zeus killing the father and then casting all the Titans and everybody to Earth. And Earth was made by his mother, Gaia. And so I forgot the Greek name for Gaia. So you have some similarities in that aspect of it. You do have the Kraken, but the Kraken was first chained up by Zeus and Poseidon. And then you have Perseus is the one who defeated the Kraken, but that was after the earth was already created. And that was all for the love of a woman. Fighting the chaos snakes fits with most up-to-date translations of Genesis 1. Yes, and it does. The Genesis story also is similar because it kind of like starts after the war, after the chaos in Genesis 1, because it talks about the wind, and Marduk used the wind in order to help defeat Tiamat. And so this one starts out, and they was in the dark. Tiamat and Anu was in the dark, and all the first gods was in the dark. And then, but once Marduk defeats Tiamat, light is then created, and the body is used. But that whole over the waters and the deep of the abyss and separating the waters, and then the vault of heaven being created. He uses Tiamat's skull to create the vault of heaven, and then all those pillars of the earth, the foundation of the earth being created. He uses Tiamat's body to create the pillars and the foundations of the earth. So the first parts of Genesis does have similarities to it. You can search this name on Google, Dr. Lisa Aubrey. Let me write that one down. If I don't write it down, it won't be found. And this pen don't want to write. And you would think that this pen don't want to write, I wouldn't put it back in this drawer. But these are my wife's pens, and I dare not throw away her pens. She is a lover of pens. My wife would literally go to a conference just to collect pens. All right. No, you only live in sin when you're here living a life that is foreign to who you truly are and being an inhumane person. But as long as humans exist on this planet, then what you call sin and what I would call sin as well will still exist. Tiamat, aka Antu, aka Apis. Yeah, there is some similarities to Tiamat, and I know some of those beings. I don't know all those beings, but very similar, especially to Apis. Apis. Isn't that shouldn't it be Apophis? But I think that is one of the ways of spelling the name, APSU. I think that's maybe Helenopolis. But yeah, that the giant snake that Ra has to keep fighting, that wants to turn everything back to darkness. And the Tiamat prophecy is that she will return everything back to darkness. She will turn everything back to darkness when all the other gods have died, been done, or over with, and all their apocalyptic stories. Tiamat feeds on the carnage and will retake her space with her husband Anu. Man, Boondock, she is the only woman I've ever met in my entire life that goes into a store, office supply store, and gets excited about pens. You know, what is her fascination with pens? I don't know what that means. S equals most humans are good because what do you? I don't know what you mean by that. Hello, Paris. How you doing? You know, I almost named my oldest daughter Paris. Like that was one of the names on the list. I'm selling your blood. I'm selling your blood. Dumbass. What kind of question is that? Yes. Do unto others if you have them do unto you. The moment you don't do that, that will be a sin against yourself. Oh, sin equal. Gotcha. Now I get it. Yes, she does. Yes. Especially if it's like a felt pen. Oh my God, they write so well. There is no link, Primer. You're just gonna sell your blood on the side of the street, and we're gonna say that it's holy blood. That is from the that we went to Israel, and we collected the blood of the red heifer, and and we're just gonna sell your blood on the side of the street, just like when you go to Israel and they sell holy water from the Jordan River, knowing good and well that shit came out of somebody's tap. Oh, damn, I smoked it. But if you would like a hand rolled cigar by my wife, because she has learned how to roll cigars very effectively, contact us at masteringyou, the number 10 at gmail.com. And you can get hand rolled cigars that my wife rolls. They're $8 individually, $7.50 if you buy more than five or more. Look, you the one came on here making your little statement about what am I selling. I'm not selling nothing. We having a conversation. I don't know why people think that I'm supposed to sit here and be all like, oh shit. I give back exactly what you give me. The energy sent is the energy returned. Yeah, she got a whole cigar rolling room downstairs. Yeah, she'll be down there. Usually she be doing it right now, but she's doing something else right now. But usually she right while I'm doing my live, she down there rolling cigars, doing all her little stuff, rolling, cutting, doing her stuff. and I smoke them. Oh yeah, I ain't gonna lie. When I was in Israel, Boondocks, that I bought some Jordan River water, and then when I went to the Jordan, I tried to scoop up some water, and the authorities were like, "Hell no, you can't scoop up that water." And I was asking like why, and it was like that water at the time frame in 91 and 92, the water was so contaminated that they wasn't letting anybody, you couldn't even get in it. So they were selling like, so I was wondering like, well, how these motherfuckers selling it? They must have purified it and then blessed it. But I used to have like jars of it, gave it to family members who was also Christian at the time. Yeah, buddy. I had me some Jordan River water. Jesus was in this water. Even though it's not the same water, but Jesus was in this water. Tried to take me a little piece of the Wailing Wall. Them jokers was watching you like a hawk. Like it was a rabbi standing like right there, like watching. Yep. They didn't say why it was so contaminated at that time frame. At least they didn't. I didn't find out why it was so contaminated at that time frame. But I think now you can go there and get in that water, get in there, and you'll see a lot of Christians. So when I went back to Israel in '96, there were people getting baptized in it. But by '96, I was like, I was definitely way on my way out. Way on my way out of the Bible. Yep, that's pretty much wading in the toilet water. I've never heard of that. Can't be worse than Indian. Oh, Indian water. I was thinking you're gonna say Indiana water. I don't know. That shit was like Flint water. I wasn't gonna mess with it. Um, yep. Adam slept with his own rib sister, his own clone. I mean, I love me some me, but I don't want to sleep with me. That don't seem right. That just seems kind of nasty. And you know their excuse with that evidence that, well, incest wasn't outlawed until Deuteronomy or Leviticus, one of them two. It wasn't outlawed till Moses. And so that by that time frame, because of the purity of their bodies, now they were starting to see changes. And like, that's just such bullshit. Man has had, oh, sorry. Man has had deformities much longer than the biblical story exists. That's why the whole, oh, we live forever, 1,000 years is a bunch of bullshit. 100 years, 300 years, bullshit. Boondocks is asking, is anybody else getting spinning? Oh, he said, yep, it's just him. Don't worry about it. Just think you were closer to Jesus and you could have received the Holy Spirit. Look, when I was in Bethlehem, and I kneeled down, and I got a picture of it somewhere. I kneeled down and was praying at the little manger. You couldn't have told me I didn't have the Holy Spirit then. And then the second time, when I went to the Protestant tomb, which is in the cliffside, well, wall side, you couldn't have told me I ain't had the Holy Spirit. I was all up in there crying and shit. Yeah, and you're right. God should always be more advanced than man. Why does he change his rules based on man's advancement? That is one of the thinking exercises that I didn't put myself through that one. One of the gentlemen who was mentoring me at the time frame put me through that one and asked that question. And I was like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you give rules based on bad biology, give rules based on bad physics, bad astronomy, and then later on try to change these things? You give bad cultural rules, and then you try to change them. As man grows, God's intelligence towards man and the way the world works grows. Your thoughts on the Apocalypse of Adam? It's good fan fiction writing. It's people trying to explain away Cain and Abel and why they did what they did, and how this God was the biblical version of God is the wrong God that people worship. It was good fan fiction. I think I read that like 20 years ago, but it was good. But I don't put any credence behind it. Because what was it? What was one of the main things about that one? Isn't that one of the books that said that Eve slept with the serpent or some shit like that? And yes, it does, Trifold. Did God create man or did man create God? My answer would be that man created God. We see it all over the place in everybody's own creation stories. Everybody's creation stories is indigenous to themselves. So why would you adopt somebody else's story? That's been a troubling thought for probably like the last 10 years. Why do people adopt the indigenous story of people that have nothing to do with them? Yep. Yeah, thank you. The guy tried to. Is that was in that one? God, when is that the story where God tried to rape Eve? There's so many of those stories. And if there is a God, I'm with you. The creator, if the creator, if the universe cannot be the God of the, if there's a creator, it is not the God of any of these books or stories. None of that bullshit. Those guys are lacking a lot of scientific information. See, let me think about that. I think one of the hardest things about the evolutionary scale is that people are looking for one day it was this bird and the next day it was a chicken. When it's such a slow process that you have to see the change over, tens of thousands of years. Like it's not this quick flip, that people are looking for. It's a very and incredibly slow process in 90% of the cases. Now with the things like Homo sapiens getting with Neanderthals and them being able to breed is kind of like lions and tigers can breed and they can have a baby. But even that still takes generations to breed into in or out one aspect. So it's just such a slow process that I don't think if you look at it, trying to look at it in this little snapshot, it's never going to work. you have to have a massive event to see some major change, like ice ages. But ice ages can last for thousands of years, and the ones we've seen have. But situations like that, but that's when you see like mass extinction things happen. Man's advancement is debunking all religion. Mahatma Gandhi racism is exposed, so he cannot be a god. No, yeah, Gandhi was racist as hell in his younger days. Nope, exactly. Those things would not have happened. It would have all been one language, one book, one understanding. Wouldn't even been a book, just one understanding. I would just change that from thousands of years to hundreds of thousands, if not million, but hundreds of thousands. I would change the hundreds of thousands of years. How is the Ice Age debatable? There's a ton of evidence that demonstrates the last Ice Age that ended around somewhere between 12 and 9,000 BCE. But there's a ton of core data, glacial movement data that supports the last Ice Age. Now, that could create a different type of humanoid species. If some red buttons are pressed and the radiation would change, I think that there would probably be enough radiation to change the genome of damn near everything on the planet. Oh Lord, Tim, he became president and then died after he was president. There are, I don't know about 59 Ice Age theories, but I do know that most geologists and climatologists and archaeologists agree on the last Ice Age that started around 35,000 BCE and lasted till about 9 to 12,000 BCE. See, let me explain this to you, Evelyn. See, God had to create man on earth. See, you must not have saw my War in Heaven video. See, God had to create man on earth because when he created the angels, he created them, in the ethereal heaven. But when they had their sense of self-determination, they rebelled against him. So he was like, nah, well, that didn't work with them having that free will and self, actualization. They rebel. So let me go on down here to earth, right? And create these beings who don't know good and evil, so that even if they have some levels of self-understanding or realization, they too dumb to do anything, to disobey. See. But then, because the first children were mad, they was like, oh, well, we're gonna mess your plan up, OG, and we're gonna trick the man. Unless you're reading the gospel, the Apocrypha of John, then that's different. That's a little different. It was Jesus who came and told man to go ahead and eat because it was the demiurge. It was the demiurge that helped man to come into his own realization. But yeah, I forgot about the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes are a demonstration of that last Ice Age. You can go out to like Montana, Wyoming. You can see the grooves from the retreating ice. But hell, we can see the remnants of we see the water table, the sea levels were 400 feet or so further out, which that had to be. You imagine living during a time frame where all of a sudden the sea levels start coming back real fast, and you know, for generations you lived on this land because the sea levels were lower, and then all of a sudden, whew. Young man, that's where you lost me. That's where you lost me. The red buttons will open up the beast. No, it'll just be a nuclear war. That's it. It's just a nuclear war. I'm sure that the survivors of it will claim some type of godly thing going on, but it's just people being people. It's people peopling. That's it. People just people. Oh yeah, he made a huge mistake. If he knew that they were going to eat from the tree, then why even make them in the first place? That don't even make sense. If this God truly wanted to be perfect in his creation, he would have made man without free will and made man so that he just automatically believes in him, worships him, and do all the shit that he want man to be at the end of times. Because at the end of times, it sounds like the ones that are up there with him are some mindless automatons that all they want to do is worship this God. Even at that, if you have free will in this end all be all, you're still gonna sit up there and after a while be like, this is some bullshit. I gotta spend an eternity doing this. This slavery. Said Google Earth shows it as the Gulf of America. Only if you're Googling it in America. If you Google it outside of America, it still says the Gulf of Mexico. Oh, it has been 2 hours, 2 hours and 58 minutes. Y'all know what time it is, and my cigar is long gone. So y'all got, because I had a half a cigar that I smoked too. That's why y'all got so much time. But I appreciate everybody for being here. We're about to get off. You guys have been great as usual. Of course, we have to always recap because y'all be going on 11 different subject matters. But thank you for being here for the primary subject matter, which was the similarities between the Babylonian creation myth and the Christian creation myth. I think that if you didn't see that part, if you go back and look at it, or look at the short version of the video that I created about an hour before I started this live, you will easily see how the Israelites borrowed heavily from the Babylonian creation story in making their own story, with the battle against the big sea dragon, the primordial waters, the coming of light, the flat earth cosmology with the dome and all that bullshit. But they heavily borrowed from them. So I'm not going to recap that whole thing because I'll be retelling the whole story again. So definitely go back and rewind this, or watch the short version, which is what I published about 3 hours ago. And yes, we talked about everything else under the sun. I did get caught up into some flat earth bullshit. But the inability of this guy to plan and build is amazing, that anybody would stay with this religion. You cannot read this book and think that it is a true book by a God who is perfect and knows all things, because there's a lot of science that this guy just does not know. So I appreciate everybody for being here, and I look forward to our conversation tomorrow. I have an idea of what we're going to start out talking about. I know y'all ain't going to stay on subject matter for about 45 minutes. But we would do our best to stay on subject a little bit longer for here on out, because y'all ain't got y'all got ADD, all of y'all. Every last one of you. But y'all have a great day, and always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and bye.